Welcome to our latest ISN live event, The Anxious Generation: How Can Educators Support Students and Parents? This CPD event is inspired by the work of Jonathan Haidt, and it feels particularly timely in the wake of greater conversations surrounding unhealthy social media use for young people. Today, we will explore the profound impact of social media and mobile phones on student well-being, from rising anxiety and unhealthy body image to peer-on-peer abuse and the spread of harmful misinformation. This session unpacks the key challenges faced by today's young people, many of whom grow up with their lives under constant scrutiny. We will focus on practical strategies to help schools and parents collaborate effectively to limit the use of social media, safeguard students, and promote healthier digital habits. To kick off our event today, we have Sean Jorgensen, safeguarding consultant and trainer, international school specialist, safe interviewing trainer, and founder of Encompass Safeguarding. Sean provides consultancy, training, and help to international schools to create safer environments for children. Welcome, Sean.
So we're here because we're talking about the anxious generation and how can educators support students and parents. So that's really the theme of our whole talk today, which is a little bit about me talking about some of the data and some of my experiences as a consultant and working with a number of schools and also working in schools myself. And then also we're going to be talking to a whole panel, and hopefully we'll be able to give some really good answers and some ideas for you all. So the first thing I want to talk about is that Jonathan Haidt came up with this, coined the phrase, the great rewiring of childhood. And really, he was talking about 4 different areas within this, because what he's seen as a psychologist and as a professional is a real impact on young people in America, their mental health and their well-being, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, self-harm, all of those things are they're getting worse and more serious. And his belief from all of his data and research he's done is that actually the phone use, and in particular social media access for young people from a very young age really, is having this real impact. And these 4 areas are where it's impacted the most, these key areas: social deprivation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, and addiction. So these are kind of the 4 key areas we're looking at. Now, there are a number of statistics that I think are actually really helpful and valuable from the book that I wanted to just bring in today, just to kind of set the scene, but also make sure we're all on the same page about how significant this issue is for our young people at the moment. So the first one was from 2010 to 2018, diagnosis of depression and anxiety among US college students more than doubled. Some other important data is that in the US, emergency room visits for self-harm rose by 188% among teenage girls and 48% among boys in the US. Now, that's in the decade leading up to 2020. We don't have new data yet for post-COVID, but I think we all know that that data is not going to have dropped. If anything, I think it's highly likely it's raised quite a lot. And I think something that's really important to recognize in this and talk to your colleagues about is that we often think of self-harm being a female, a girl, a teenage girl issue. And actually, there's a few points around that. We're seeing children younger and younger exhibiting self-harm behaviors. And also, as we've seen here, it's up by 48% with boys. And we need to really recognize that boys do experience self-harm, and this is something we need to be aware of, but often it can look quite different. So one form of self-harm that you or your colleagues may not be aware of is that some boys have been known to punch the wall, for example, or punch a door. And yes, we can view that as a anger and a emotional dysregulation behavior, but actually it depends on the reason why they're doing it, what's their thinking of why they're doing it. And some boys, we know from research, are doing that because they feel the need to release the anger or the emotion, but actually the pain that happens from it, hurting their hand, has the same, it's the same impact that they're looking for, the same kind of emotional release that girls are in other ways of self-harming. So it's just one example of how boys may be self-harming, but also how it very much can be hidden because we might view it as a behavioral issue or an emotional issue as opposed to self-harm and that need to cope, that coping strategy. Another issue is that the suicide rate for young adolescents, he found, has increased by 167% among girls and 91% among boys. Now, to me, those figures are really shocking. And I think when we look at figures like that, it's really, really important that we bring it back to children, because each of that percentage are a number of children within this. Each of those children have families, have friends, have teachers, have school communities. So the impact is not just to look at statistics, which can be shocking, but it's to remember that these are young people at the center of these statistics. And that's really what we need to focus on, is the young people. And the statistics can be helpful. They can be helpful with our deciding what we're going to do. We're talking to parents, with convincing board members, maybe, with starting something that's going to go across your whole community. But within that, we have to also recognize these children. Through the book, there were two particular kind of phrases that I really picked up on. I've written them here. And this was around research around older students in the US. But one of the phrases was, life often feels meaningless. And the number of young people who felt that, who agreed to that statement, was up by around 10%. Now, that's such a strong statement if you think about it. Life often feels meaningless because, we think our children, our young people should be out with their friends, enjoying life, doing stupid things, doing funny things, whatever it might be. But actually, that feeling of meaningless or hopelessness is something that you don't necessarily equate to teenagers. So it's just something to be really aware of. And the other one is children saying they felt satisfied with themselves. He found that that dropped by 20%. Now, again, it's not surprising in a way when we think about all the social media impact of body image, of looking at all these Instagram, the posts, the way that things could be manipulated. I mean, quite recently, I believe that TikTok had an addition with a filter for TikTok, and it was a filter where you could make somebody chubby. And there was a really big pushback around that because actually the what it's saying is it's funny or it's wrong. We're making fun of people who are chubby, is what it's saying. And also, I think just putting in these filters, just having this as an option, actually suggests to people that they're not good enough how they are. And so it's not surprising that that figure's dropped by around 20%, but it is sad. And it's something we really need to be aware of. And we really need to be able to talk to our students about and help their parents to talk to them as well. So something else that I thought was really interesting in the book is how he made the link between risk and the impact of phones and social media. Now, I thought this was just absolutely fascinating to me. So historically, accidental admissions for hospital, so going to the A&E department or whatever it is, the ER, depending on what country you're in, that's always been high for boys. And it's been higher for boys than girls, but it's always been high because they're out doing things, climbing trees, riding bikes, making stupid decisions to jump over something, with a bike, whatever it might be. We expect them to be skateboarding, active, you know, and alongside that comes injuries, but it is interesting now because I think anecdotally for myself, growing up, I remember having children coming to school with their arm in casts, a cast. You remember signing casts? That was quite standard. And I'm not suggesting that we want children to be injured and have broken bones. That's not our goal. But actually, it is a part of childhood, doing risky things, trying different things. They don't always go wrong. Sorry, don't always go right. But what his research is finding is actually that's happening less and less. And those numbers and figures have come down so much that boys who were the whole group of boys were significantly higher than girls, but now they're actually about the same. And even more shocking to me is that boys are now about as likely as 50 to 60-year-old men to get injured. And we can think about that in a lot of different ways, and there may be plenty of 50 or 60-year-old men who are off climbing and hiking and riding bikes and doing things like that, which could be risk taking. But teenagers they should be taking more risks. They should be trying more things than that group of men. And so I think this is something again to think about is where do your students who maybe get taxis or driven in the car every day to school, picked up again, what are they doing at the weekend? Do they even know how to ride a bike? I think it's quite surprising and sometimes shocking to find out how many 10 or 12-year-olds now don't know how to ride a bike because they've never had the opportunity. No one's ever taught them or shown them how to do it because the world looks a little bit different for them. And a story I'd just like to share is that when my children were at school in Norway, um, the thing they remember the most, and they still talk about how much they loved. One was in top end of elementary school, and the other is the first year of what would have been secondary school. And the thing they remember most about school in Norway was that they were allowed to climb trees. And there was nobody saying get down for the tree. In fact, they had two or three trees on the school grounds, and it was a local school, a local barnehagen in Norway, or barnaskole, sorry, in Norway. But they climbed trees and all their friends climbed trees. And yeah, kids fell out of trees sometimes and injured themselves, but they got good at climbing, right? They got good at figuring out their limits and they got good at working together. So there were a few times when my son did get stuck up a tree, and it wasn't the teachers that helped them down, it was the other kids. It was the other kids that said, put your hand there, put your foot there, it's okay. And that communication and that risk taking, learning your abilities and your limits is really amazing. That how often do our kids get to climb trees? Now, with the book, of course, when there comes to any research and anything out there, there's always an alternative view. And I think it's really valid that we look at those alternative views and actually we do challenge our own thinking, because actually parents are going to challenge our thinking, kids are going to challenge, students are going to challenge our thinking. So I think it's absolutely right that we do look at those things and think about them ourselves. So I just wanted to share this research that came out very recently in February this year. And the title, not the title of the research, but the headline, the clickbait looking at it was banning phones in schools doesn't improve grades or how they feel. So immediately you're thinking, well, everything Jonathan Haidt, they're saying the opposite. Maybe we shouldn't be doing it, all those things. But actually, when I looked at the research, that wasn't quite the information I was getting. And I think this is where it's really important that we get past those titles and actually think about it together. So they did find that there was no difference in mental health, sleep, behavior, or academic outcomes between the students who were the 12 to 15-year-olds who were at schools who were phone free compared to schools that weren't. They also found no impact on the total daily or weekly phone or social media use. So the students who didn't have it in school were using it just as much outside school and at the weekends. But I think this is really important. What they did find is that more screen time equaled poorer outcomes. So higher phone use or social media use was linked to lower well-being, worse sleep, reduced activity, more classroom disruption, and lower attainment, which again does tie in very much with what is said in the anxious generation. Because, and it's what we know, it's what we're seeing, right? But this is more research that's actually agreeing with that. But what they're saying is really, in their opinion, the key is that the restrictive policies in a school alone are not enough to improve outcomes. We've got to do a holistic approach. And I think we know that, and we're talking about that. But to me, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing that in school. You shouldn't be creating a space where students aren't on phones in school. What it means is actually we should be doing more of that, but we should be making sure that the community are with us, that parents are with us, that children are able to do activities outside school that don't involve phones. So it's about not saying this isn't working, it's saying this is a start, but we need to do more. And how can we bring everybody else in, parents, I mean, gosh, hopefully the government and the social media companies, all of those as well, wishful thinking sometimes, I know. But how can we get everybody in? Because actually it isn't enough, but doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it. Now, I just wanted to give a couple of examples because these are things that or that people have talked to me about. So I support and supervise DSL, safeguarding leads in schools, and I also get called in if there's quite a high level or very complex child safeguarding or child protection situation. So I do speak with a lot of schools and I speak with a lot of people at conferences and events as well. And what I'm hearing is that the schools that don't allow phones in, now for older students, IB students, they may well be allowed in the common room, but there's limits to that. But the schools that are not allowing students in are seeing a real difference. They're seeing students are communicating, especially at break time, lunchtime. They're connecting better with each other. They're supporting each other better. And actually, sometimes I've also heard about there being less difference. So we all have students who have differences. All students have differences, but those appear to be more valued or accepted perhaps, and more, okay, it's okay to be friends with somebody who's a little bit different than you perhaps, because there's more, well, I don't know because, but my assumption is it's because maybe there's a little bit more time. Maybe that actually there's more time to get to know them. There's more communication. So you can understand that maybe they're a bit different from you in some ways, and maybe they're a bit quirky or a bit awkward, but actually they're funny and they're smart and they're a really good runner and they're who you want to have on your team if you play tag and all of those kind of things. So it allows children to see the benefit of others because they're not attached to their phones as much. And actually, maybe those voices that influence them are not the influencers online, but they're the people around them. So they get to see people a little bit differently. And the last one I just want to raise is about school trips. So schools have really different viewpoints about trips. I've heard that some allow students to have phones on trips. I've heard that some allow them to have for a couple hours a night on trips. Some ban them altogether. And the ones who are not allowing phones on trips at all, yes, they have pushback from parents. I even heard of a student who brought 6 spare phones, old phones with them to give out to all his friends on one trip. But when they don't have their phones, actually that's 3, 4, 5 days when they're not connected and influenced by them. And what people are seeing is actually those relationships are building, they're more supportive, they are taking some risks together, but funny, appropriate, supportive risks as well. And it is making a difference. And those children are seeming to be overall happier and much, much more engaged with the learning. So hopefully you're going to be finding similar things in your schools. And I think we're all really interested to discuss what makes it hard to go phone free and what are the challenges you have to actually create more of a play-based learning at your school for all students from age 3 up to 18. So thank you so much, Claire. I really appreciate the time. And back to you.
We're going to hand over now to our second session to the National College, to Jamie Ganley and also to Anna Bateman. So the National College is the leading professional development platform for international schools around the world, with over 1 million educators and 45,000 schools worldwide. Using their online training platform, the National College are well positioned to talk on this topic. They have materials for educators and for parents on wellbeing, on social media use, and on additional wellbeing topics. So I want to welcome Jamie Ganley, who's Head of Sales at National College, and also Anna Bateman, who will be talking with Jamie, who's a mental health trainer and specialist with over 30 years experience in education. Anna is the lead mental health subject specialist at the National College.
Great, thanks, Claire. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. So as a quick introduction, so as Claire said, my name's Jamie Ganley and I'm the head of memberships here at the National College. And I think similar to just before, I think with the number, when you saw those numbers increasing, it definitely adds to your nerves coming into the event, but it's really exciting to be part of such an important topic that clearly across our international education community is really at the forefront and sort of very well timed. But as an introduction to the National College, so as Claire said, we work with, over the time of sort of the last 10 years, we've worked with over 40,000 different schools in different capacities. And to our core membership for professional development, we have over 500 international school members all over the world. But today I want to specifically look at working with parents and specifically with our Wake Up Wednesday resources and our campaign around that, and to share knowledge around this topic. So as a bit of background, hashtag Wake Up Wednesday started during COVID. And what we tried to do was provide free resources to parents and to schools all over the world. It's free to access. You simply create an account on our platform. And what you're able to do is get access to materials around online safety, mental health and well-being. And also, I think climate education is not a focus of today. But I think for a lot of young people, that does create considerable anxiety when you think about the future and what prospects might be. But given the name, what we do is we provide updates every Wednesday, so each week. And on our social media platforms, we have over 59,000 followers on Facebook. We have around 500 shares per week. And you can also find us on all the other platforms, so X, LinkedIn, and we've recently started on Blue Sky Social, which obviously many educators are transferring to. But for our podcast, you can also find us on Spotify. And yeah, I very much welcome you to follow the resources following this conversation and following today. But starting off, what we have here is for online safety and mental health and wellbeing is we have parent-specific courses that they can access. And generally they're around 1 hour and they're all age related. So we do them for kind of early years, we do them at primary age, early secondary, and then going into kind of sixth form, 16 to 18 and beyond really. And we work with Mylene Class, who's a TV presenter here in the UK, and she's, you know, well-renowned internationally. And in this example, what you can see for online safety, we've broken it down into 5 modules. The first being parenting in a digital world. What does that mean? You know, the second module looks at what are the risks and what are children accessing online, before going into specific examples in part 1 and part 2, which is modules 3 and 4. And specifically also looking at what to do if you're concerned as a parent, what actions can you take, you know, and some next steps and some support there with a reflection and impact goals at the end. Upon completion of those modules, there's a final multiple choice test in the same way as all of our other content at the National College. And upon completion, the parents can get a certificate, which is also CPD certified. And it's quite a nice way for, you know, for schools to engage the parent community into this conversation and provide resources for parents to go and be able to access. We also have a couple of hundred different short explainer videos that are generally 3 to 4 minutes. And we look at topics such as online bullying. We look at things like fake news or setting up security tips, looking at deep fakes, which is unfortunately a horrendous element of the online world. And then also things like VPNs. I think actually it was and Haley, I don't know if it was Kellett or another school in Hong Kong I spoke to where they had a 6-year-old using a VPN and the parents had just moved there and had no idea what that was. And I thought that was quite a amusing conversation about clearly how well children are accessing the online world and better than people our age in many ways. The second element of Wake Up Wednesday is our guides. And what we do is every Wednesday we'll release something new or something updated around the online world, or to do with wellbeing, or to do with climate education. And these are really popular with, you know, you can download them, you can share them onto socials. Lots of schools push these out through parent communication channels. Some schools print them out, you know, in A4, A5, A3, stick them onto walls. And because they come in PDF form, they're also quite easy to translate as well. So lots of schools use translation software to put them into different languages. But what we generally try and do with these is explain what are the main risks associated with different apps or games or different elements of those topics. And then also suggesting what could parents and educators in many instances do to help mitigate those risks. And just some examples of the newest ones that have come out is we released one about Marvel Rivals last week. So they got a new update, I believe, on that game. Can't say I play it myself. But we've released a guide recently for managing exam stress. Also, we did an update for streaming, or for streamers. So for children that are streaming online, what does that mean? And then looking interestingly at the most downloads so far this academic year, on our international platform, the most downloaded one, unsurprisingly, was looking at social media safety tips and how to make your accounts private. And then, but the second most downloaded guide, which was quite surprising to me, was what parents and educators need to know about Roblox. And I don't have any children yet, but I've never heard of Roblox. And so that for me really surprised me. But that's clearly an area where lots of schools and parents, you know, feel like they need more support with. Some other sort of the most downloaded topics, we've got the usual, we've got TikTok, we've got YouTube, using WhatsApp, managing screen time, obviously a big part of what we've just discussed. Safety tips for smartphones, using Snapchat, and you know, lots of other, you know, we often have things like to do with influencers or lots of other topics as well. But I do welcome you to have a look on the platform, and if there's a topic we've not covered that you've identified, we would definitely, yeah, like to hear from you, and we'll definitely create something in that area. And then next, I mean, I'm delighted, and it was kind of a good, it was really nice that Anna was able to join us today. So a good coincidence. So Anna's been working with the National College and creating content with us for, I think, probably the best part of almost 10 years, Anna. That's about right.
Yeah,
Been
pretty
quite a
much
long time.
since it's started. Yeah,
Since
I
the beginning.
remember a small room in Scunthorpe with about 3 people, and I've been with the National College since then. Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent, and yeah, great to have you here. And I guess one area I wanted to ask you was, obviously we've got all the materials here, the Wake Up Wednesday campaigns, the guides, the courses, the videos. But do you have any advice for how schools can help engage their parent community? Like how do you bring them into conversation?
Yeah, a great question. And I think, when we think about what the National College offer in terms of the Wake Up Wednesdays, I think it's a brilliant opportunity because I'm a strategist. I look at mental health from a strategic point of view. And one of the key things that I ask schools to do is to look at, kind of the assets that you've got in school. So looking at the people, the programs and the resources. But actually, interestingly, one of the assets that we can use to our advantage is the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, I'm trying to say it, which is a frequency bias. This is when you'll notice something new, well, maybe at least new to you. So this could be a word or a breed of dog or a particular style of car or house or something. And suddenly you're aware that it's all over the place. You've noticed it more because you've started seeing it more and talking about it more. And it's not that it's actually more around, it's just that you've noticed it more and your brain is simply reinforcing some newly acquired information. This is the same when we're engaging with our parents and carers, and particularly when we're thinking about the digital world and getting them to engage, as well as our children and young people as well. So we can use this phenomenon to our advantage. When we look at our Wake Up Wednesdays, it means that we can use this as one of the touch points in which we can share information about key things in Wake Up Wednesday, as well as maybe leading a campaign around that Wake Up Wednesday. So it's not just one document. We actually use that document as a touch point of various different touch points around a focused campaign on digital detox, for example. And it's really useful for that. The other thing is, obviously, as you've said, Jamie, it's keeping ahead of the curve around what's out there. There are lots of games, apps, information that our parents and carers have absolutely no idea about. And so using that information to your advantage to get that focus, using that kind of phenomenon of getting that focus and understanding for our parents and carers, and using them as part of a touch point and conversation rather than just something to download and send out is a really powerful tool when we're looking at this.
Thanks, Anna. And so many ways it's continuous training, isn't it? It's
absolutely,
in the same way in school we train staff over time. We don't believe in just a one inset session and move on. It's got to be a continuous process.
And I think on that, schools forget that actually CPD around mental health is an intervention in itself. The fact that we will use CPD to train our staff and our parents and carers on how to spot the signs around the feeling of our anxiety and the behaviours around that, for example, is an intervention in itself. It means that we're not waiting for crisis. It means we're understanding how our children and young people are feeling, and then being able to, talk, discuss, and also look at how we can create and develop resilience around that as well.
Yeah. No, thanks, Anna. That's really helpful. And then just to finish, I'm conscious I'm coming up to my 10 minutes, but as a bit of background to the National College, for those that aren't aware, is we have 3 different membership options. So we have our Wake Up Wednesday, which is free. But if you're also looking for training in these topics and many others for all staff and for leaders and for directors of schools, we've got our professional development membership on the left-hand side, which is our most popular package. We then also have a compliance management membership in the middle, which is all around keeping compliant on your most important documents, on your policies, and also keeping up to date with international news and education. Many of these topics today will be covered within that. And then on the right-hand side, which was really exciting for us in September 2024, so very recent, is we merged with Blue Sky Education, which brings their appraisal and people development platform in line with our professional development resources to really measure impact of all the training you're doing over time. How does that link in with the school development plan? And that's something we've been working on and will continue to do so over the next 12 months and beyond. So to finish, hopefully on here, I've got a couple of links here, and I think Claire's also going to share a link to the Wake Up Wednesday website. But if you're interested in finding out more about the National College or simply about the Wake Up Wednesday resources, then please do get in touch with us. Wake Up Wednesday will always be free. It's there to be utilised by schools wherever you are in the world. So please do go and make the most of that. But thanks for listening, and I'll pass back to you, Claire.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Anna, for sharing. So the slides for both of these presentations will also be available in the recording that is sent out afterwards, so you can always find all of these resources afterwards. Okay, thank you. We're now going to jump into our panel discussion. And so this is on the impact of social media use and, importantly, the practical strategies and policies that can be introduced to implement changes in international schools, so supporting educators, parents, and ultimately protecting young people. So we have had an introduction from Anna and Fashan. So I just wanted to also introduce Hayley quickly before we jump in. So Hayley Wilson is the Deputy Head of Senior School and Pastoral Community and Wellbeing at the Kellett School, so the British International School in Hong Kong. She has 18 years experience across 4 continents in British international schools, has a master's in leading mental health and wellbeing in schools, and has also written and led bespoke training on how to be a senior mental health lead. So welcome, Hayley. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us here today. So our panelists would like to start, first of all, by asking everybody here in the training to gather a snapshot of your experiences. So we're going to ask the question, what are the most concerning trends that you've observed regarding student anxiety and social media use in schools? We're going to do this by launching a quick poll. So if you could just put your results in here. Okay, so lots of people then experiencing an increase in bullying, use of sexualized or inappropriate language, impact on friendship and misogyny, and parents who feel that they can't control the device use and how that's happening at home, and lots of people sharing lots of different options there in the chat as well. So as we mentioned earlier, we know that there has been some resistance to Jonathan Haidt's research. However, we are still, as educators, experience a lot of this within the schools and within the young people that we're teaching. So it's so important that we have this conversation. I will quickly stop sharing now. Okay, and we're going to jump into our first question. So we really want to focus today on what the key issues are, and then what are the strategies, what support can we put in place to give practical advice and takeaways to everybody who's joined us. So we want to start first of all, and Anna, you're going to lead this question for us. We wanted to ask, what are the warning signs that a student may be experiencing anxiety or mental health struggles related to social media?
Certainly, and thanks for allowing me to start off. So obviously, when we think about our safeguarding hat on, we're going to be already looking for changes in behaviour. And of course, this includes over time as well. But what we are also going to be seeing is a combination of things. It won't necessarily just be one thing. So we are going to be looking at that constantly, checking notifications, the anxiety and irritability that comes when we're not able to access social media. And in the long term, that noticeable drop in academic performance or participation due to social media use. And I think we really need to understand that impact of isolation that occurs, because when we become isolated, and we may have a vulnerability in terms of mental health, so whether that is already an anxiety or already we may have low self-esteem, then actually the more isolated we become, the more difficult it becomes, the more entrenched, and longer term issues then arise. We may see mood changes or emotional distress, so the rapid mood swings, and we can see from the data that was shared at the beginning from Sean, we're looking at that depression and anxiety, but avoiding friends and usual activities that we might see from our child or young person. The sleep deprivation is the other biggest area as well that we see. If we see those kind of polls that you shared, but we do know that sleep deprivation is a massive issue in terms of mental health. We don't realise, and I think sometimes our parents and carers really need sort of educating on the impact of sleep deprivation on mental health, and not just academic performance, but their ability to see the world differently when they are sleep deprived. And any parents on the call who've got young children, you'll know that yourself when you don't have sleep, what impact it has on how we see things, how we see our friendships, and things like that. And then, as you've alluded to in the poll, it's that signs of cyberbullying, that impact on their relationships and their ability to relate to others. And I think the challenge we've got with social media is the unregulated access. right? Because that's amplifying worries and confidence issues and low self-esteem. We haven't got adults that are helping to settle and to support our children and young people as they're growing their sense of self. So let's take rumination, for example. This is a repetitive negative thought processes. This is a sort of looping continuously. You'll know this when you've had an overwhelming day, or perhaps you've had a conversation with a member of staff that's been a bit tricky, and you've gone home and you've ruminated on it and you're kind of overthinking on it. Now, most of us as adults, we can settle that rumination and it doesn't continue as a loop. We could perhaps chat with a friend, or a cup of tea, or a walk with a dog really helps with those things. The challenge we've got with social media is that there isn't an ability to teach and help our children to self-soothe that rumination. They're actually using technology to self-soothe that rumination. So we end up in a bigger loop. And we've seen, haven't we, parents who are handing maybe a younger child an iPad who's distressed to help them to soothe. We've all done it, but if it's done all the time, then actually all our children and young people are doing is learning how to self-soothe that rumination or overwhelm with an iPad, with social media. So we end up in this big loop. So we have a really big part to play as adults and as schools, as communities, to help our children to understand how we can self-soothe, how we can connect with each other away from the social media and away from those things. And I'll talk again in a question. I know I've got this later on to answer about how we can do that. But hopefully that sort of started the thinking off.
Thank you, Anna. Was there anything else from our other panelists on that question?
I was just really recognizing what you were saying about rumination, because I know that a lot of young people I've worked with, and as a counsellor prior to doing the safeguarding work, or alongside it, I should say, and a lot of teens talk about overthinking and that they actually can't control those thoughts, and it really stresses them. They recognize they're doing it, they know they're doing it, and they know that the impact is negative for them, and yet the skills just aren't there to kind of recognize what is fact versus their self-opinion, and I think that's really hard. And like you said, the algorithms that send them down these echo chambers, it just makes it incredibly hard for them to step out and think about things in a different way. So I really recognize what you were saying.
Yeah, thank you, Sian. We'll move into our next question, which we're directing towards Hayley, and you might be able to kind of expand on this point as well. Can you explain how you and your colleagues at Kellett processed the findings of Haight's book as a school, and the data that you gathered, the steps that you then took?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be here and see so many people online. I want to take you back, though, to sort of October 2023. And that's when we started having the discussion. And I didn't read the book until April 2024. And we had the discussion because we started a new programme for gathering our student wellbeing data. And when we cross-reference what we were gathering from our student wellbeing data, we used the platform Komodo, and we were seeing how much time they're spending on social media outside of their learning, or spending on screens outside of their learning, the impact on how they feel social connectedness, the impacts that we were seeing in terms of what was coming in to our safeguarding logs. I'm the DSL of the senior school as well, but also the pastoral issues that we were managing, the kinds of situations that we were managing involving bullying, involving online things that wouldn't have happened if social media wasn't there. We took the decision using that data to tell everybody, actually, this is what you're telling us. You're telling us this is impacting you. So we need to step in as a school. So we actually spent a lot of time front loading that, sharing the fact that this has come from the students. We wrote articles to the parents. We wrote tutor time lessons for our students. And there was a little bit of resistance to begin with from the students, and understandably so. They're very defensive about their phones, which I think is why in your article that you found, Sian, I'm so glad you shared that, from 12 to 15-year-olds, they are really protective over these devices. They think that they are mature enough to use them. They think that they don't have an issue. It's really important to them and their connections, or so they think. And so they're defensive over it. But we went for it. And what we instantly saw, and just to rewind for context, we weren't really a school that allowed phones to be out and about. But they were allowed to have them in the mornings, and they were allowed to have them after school, and they were allowed to bring them out if the teacher, said they could. But you inevitably see people on them at lunchtimes. The change was almost instantaneous in terms of that connection. And we have a massive indoor atrium. We were seeing our year 7s and 8s playing Duck Duck Goose and just talking to one another and being with one another. But that wasn't just it. This has been like a huge program and development. So one of the big things that we used was an article that I found in The Guardian that translated the time that you spend on a screen to months and years of your life. And that was frightening. And so we showed that to our students and we were like, imagine what else you could have done with this time. And what we did is we interleaved for that first term. So we're talking January to April 2024 of here's some resources, here's some conversations, here's some provocations around our devices and our social media context and our use. Because whilst we've limited it in school, and this is great, your wellbeing data is improving, and we also want to help you outside of school. And we supported that with our families outside of school as well. We sent them a family contract as to what we do when we take our devices. And we also host dinner discussions for families. And those dinner discussions start as young as year 5. And so we're trying to get the parents on board quite early with what our understanding is of phones. Then the book was released and I read it in April and I was like, oh my goodness, this is so aligned with what we're doing as a school. I need my community to read this. And so we decided to host a first community book club. And it was really well received. And I think parents were grateful. One thing parents really struggle with is actually taking the phone away. And there's a regret, isn't there? Like, oh my gosh, I actually gave this to my child. What am I going to do now? But equally, there is a body of parents who do not want to go there. They don't want to give their child a phone. So being able to have that dialogue was brilliant at that dinner discussion. And what we've been doing is constantly returning to the conversation based on research. And when you're talking to your families, when we're talking to our students about this is what the research is saying, this is what your data is saying, people buy into it so much more because it's not, well, this is what Miss Wilson thinks. This is not what Kellett thinks. This is what the science is telling us. This is what your data is telling us. And we've spent a lot of time and energy and effort developing our curriculum around that as well. We do allow our sixth formers to have their phones in the sixth form centre because we want them to sort of learn the regulation of not having their phones. And if we see them on their phones around the school, we take it off them, we confiscate it. And we're actually in discussions at the moment about whether or not we'll get like a voluntary lock away box situation. I know lots of schools have gone down the routes of yonder pouches, but we haven't felt the need to do that. We have gone around the route of education, discussion, trust. This is why we're doing this. And we often do remind them as they walk out of school, like, and they try and get their phones out, like, no, out the building. We're still there with that, but it does take time and effort. And what's really interesting is this week, I've been having lessons with year 12 about social media and phones off the back of adolescence. I'm just going to share this report with you. It's a really good report. I've had a conversation with year 12 about this today. And I'm like, you know, looking back, do you think the age that you got your phone, was that an appropriate time for you to get social media? Do you think that you were able to manage yourself? And quite often at that age in sixth form, they're like, no, I wasn't. And I wasn't prepared for what I was going to get. And I wasn't prepared to take all this on without any direction or guidance. And what's wonderful is when we take our older students to talk to our younger students and we bring them into the classroom. And what I would say is where we've had this implemented now for a good amount of time, the younger students aren't really pushing against it. Like one of the most rebellious things they did was, you know, they tried to go to the toilet to listen to Taylor Swift's new album when it was released. But generally, the community are getting on board. Generally, it's because there's a trust there, there's a dialogue there. And as I said, it's supported by their data. And we've done a lot of work to bring the parents on board with us. And I know we're going to talk about parents later, but I've gone from having five people at an in-person parent event to consistently 120. And so it's, you know, how do we make that work? How do we engage our community? How do we have this dialogue together? And it's powerful and it's purposeful. And what I will say is there are very, very grateful parents for it because they don't want to be the only parent who is resisting or the only parent who is holding back. And I've noticed in the chat that the comment about phones on trips, we went point blank, no, you're not taking them on Global Outlook Week. And interestingly, that's where we've had our biggest resistance. That's where there has been a little bit of pushback. That's where like, oh no, I'm not going to speak to my child for 5 days. I want to speak to my child. And I understand it. I'm a mother. My son is in year 7. And, you know, we were in COVID for a long time here in Hong Kong. You know, you walk out the doors, people are just here. That's where the resistance has been. And so that's why we've had to, again, educate, have those webinars, justify our why. and continue to make sure that we're educating around it. And importantly, educate around the connection skills that our children are potentially missing, and making sure that that's really explicit in our curriculum, giving them purpose so that they feel, actually, yeah, this is really important. I'm going to do this, instead of just doom scrolling. So it's a big piece, but it's an important piece. Sorry, I went on for ages then.
No, that was it was fascinating to hear, right from kind of inception and what you were doing, and how you gathered kind of the support of the school, and feeding the students words kind of back to them. This is what you've told us. This is the feedback that we've received from you, and working together to kind of establish that policy. Quite a few people were interested in some of those articles that you listed, so we'll make sure that we get all of those then at the end of this. So, hey, I think you kind of touched on this slightly, the results that you've witnessed. But then, as a kind of pastoral and safeguarding lead, what have been your experiences since adopting a phone-free campus?
Yeah, now obviously I've got no like categorical data to attribute this. It is more anecdotal, but there is definitely a decline in what's going on in terms of, I think, the big in bullying issues that we're having online. But I wouldn't attribute that solely to, we've got rid of phones. I would attribute it to the entire piece that's gone around it. The way that we're approaching working with our parents, the transparency that we have around issues when we have them, the articles that we send home, and the learning that we send home for parents. We do actually send National College learning home for parents as well, sometimes, if they want to engage with it. I think all of that is contributing to us seeing fewer cases of bullying and issues online, especially things like sextortion or sexting, things like that can be big issues. We are seeing fewer widespread cases of self-harm. And I haven't had things come through so much more recently around sort of body image, but we are doing a lot around our curriculum with that, and having those really big, courageous conversations with our students, but also with our parents. We have those very difficult conversations with them and say, this is the state of the land. This is where we're at. This is what's going on. You need to know that. We would be doing you a disservice if we didn't tell you. But yes, we are seeing those things come down. I'm having, fewer, if you like, internal reflections, because we are having fewer things that we need to handle in terms of the behaviour policy, which I think then is helpful. And, I have that in terms of numbers. There are fewer of those this academic year than there was last academic year. Can I correlate the two? Not necessarily. But I think that it's been the right move. And would I go back? No, I wouldn't.
Thank you for sharing. It's fascinating to kind of learn a little bit more about the results and what you're seeing on the ground in your school. Our next question, I know that lots of what we've talked about so far has been about the idea of going completely kind of phone free within school campus, but we want to talk about other strategies, other ways that we can support young people and parents and teachers as well. So Sian, our question is for you. So as well as supporting phone free childhood, Hay also suggests that play-based learning, effective modelling, and providing opportunities for agency and autonomy are essential. How can schools support the development of this for their students and provide guidance for parents?
Thank you. So I think the first thing we all need to do is really spend the time in your schools, in your teams, whatever that group is, and think about what play actually is and what it could be, what it should be. Because I think when we talk about play, especially in schools, we talk about early years, we talk about, primary school students, and we talk about the areas they have and the equipment you have and the space. But the reality is that actually everybody needs to play on some level, and play is not, I think what you mean by that term is really important to discuss as a group. So if you're in a high school or a middle school, a lot of people kind of dismiss it because the terminology suggests that it's for younger children. But actually, when we look at what play, and to me, play is really that kind of non-directed actions and activities. So where the students themselves come up with, what are we going to do together, rather than what's an adult going to organise for us to do. And thinking about that, and whether it is the duck, duck, goose that I think Hayley mentioned, or whether it's playing tag. I know that some schools have tried, put table tennis tables outside, but it's about having that, what could this look like for this age group? And actually also, what are the barriers for that age group? Because I remember working at a school a while ago where a group of year 7 students were playing tag, but actually playing tag running around school was causing issues and actually got them in a bit of trouble because, you know, they were not necessarily knocking people over, but people were worried they were going to knock over other students or whatever it was, and it was loud and silly. So I think it is about looking, how can we provide that space, that time where they can be completely independent, actually they can figure things out? Because at the moment, I would say we've all had the experiences where if somebody doesn't have a phone, an activity, a thing they're being told to do, then they actually get a bit stuck. And the immediate response is, I'm bored, I don't know what to do. And I know that drives parents like myself absolutely doolally, because you're like, you've got all these things you've been given, you've got all these toys, you know, or you've got all this stuff we provided for you and you're not doing any of it. But I think there is a real issue that we almost have to find ways to teach children and teens to actually create that space where they do play. And it's almost like that boredom piece needs to be okay again, because within boredom, I think there's a space for creativity. And I'm not suggesting we want all our students to be bored all the time or anything like that, but it is about what can you open up? You know, for younger students, it's about having a space where there might be somebody there, obviously, to make sure that they're okay and not harming themselves in any way. But at the same time, are you able to step back and not create things for them to do? They have the things, they have each other. What can they create? And maybe sometimes kids need a prompt. Like, you know, you could have a jar with some ideas written out, like, I don't know, a visit to the doctors, or it could be, we're going to create a birthday party for somebody, whatever those prompts might be, or there's a big blue dragon coming, what are you going to do? You know, they can pull out a prompt perhaps and then create something, do something. So I think sometimes our students do need support. So they need something, whether it's a prompt, whether it's an idea, whether it's some tools in order to create that play. Because a little bit like Hayley was saying, it's not just about saying, we're taking your phone away or you can't have access to your phone. We have to kind of reteach them how to create that space and that play, because actually it has been missing. I think it's been missing in a lot of places. And it may even just having a couple of advocates in that group or in that class or in that, you know, that can help people as well, that you have somebody who is really creative and giving them the voice and the space to show that, to encourage people. Hayley, you have some ideas.
Linking to the play is the sort of the interage, the multi-age group opportunity to bring students together. And I think it's really hard in international schools, certainly for where I am here in Hong Kong. It was the case in Houston and it was the case in Cairo. The students all live really far apart. And so it's not necessarily that easy for them to come together all the time and play and experiment. So how are we as schools creating opportunities for them to come together as multi-ages as well, to be creative, as Shan pointed out, and to give them that opportunity to explore, connect, and get to know with each other? And we used our tutor times to do that quite creatively. That's a really important thing. It doesn't cost you any money as a school. You know, it takes a little bit of effort to organize it, but these are small things that we can do to help them, you know, get to know their community, get to know their school, and have that interage opportunity beyond like lunch times, break times, where they are with their friends, because they don't have that much unstructured time. That, you know, and especially in some cities, they don't even have access to a lot of nature where they can go climbing trees and being creative. So I think schools need to be looking at what they can be doing with that as well.
Thank you for sharing. I'm really aware that we don't have much time left and we want to kind of keep to 1 hour, and we do still have 2 questions. And I really wanted to, lots of people are asking about how to support parents in this and kind of building that connection with parents. Anna, are you able to give us a very, very quick whistle-stop answer to, I'm really sorry to put the pressure on with this question, about this sense of real-world communities. So Haight suggests potentially then that developing more kind of real-world communities is a real way to support young people, parents and educators, to kind of remove mobile phone use and dependency on mobile phone use. How can schools foster a sense of belonging for students?
Certainly. Thank you. And it's lovely to be on a panel where I feel like we're just sort of building on each other as we go, because what I'm going to say is that we can build that in. And I think looking at Dan Siegel's 4 S's of secure attachments, if there's nothing else that you don't go away with, just remember these. It's safe, seen, soothed, and secure. So those, if we're reducing phone use or stopping phone use in school, for example, we do need to be bringing these things in. So those secure attachments serve as that secure base from which children can explore the world, to take the risks, and to develop a sense of independence. And when they feel safe and supported in their relationships, they're more likely to develop a strong sense of self and be able to do the things that we're suggesting in terms of how to learn those relationship skills again. So, for example, I work with one large sort of secondary girls' school, and they removed the time of form time in the morning, and they removed form time in the afternoon. And what we found was the behaviour of the children had changed dramatically and worsened, because they didn't have the point at which in the morning they came in and they were seen. They were seen by the form tutor, they were seen by their friends, and they just had that 10 minutes or 20 minutes together. And they brought that back in, and we don't eradicate all behaviour problems, I know that's not a thing, but it reduced those issues, the arguments and the falling out, because they were seen, they were connected the minute they got into school and before they went away. So don't underestimate those powerful things that you can do in school to create that sense of belonging. And if there's, just remember, I see you, and helping our students to be seen and to be connected with is really powerful. And then when you bring in your parents and carers into that space for them to understand, look, this is what we're doing at school, come and see what we're doing, you tend to get, and that's why I think the success of what Hayley's done is phenomenal, because we've gone, actually, this is what we're doing as a school, we've spoken to our students, this is what they've said, and come and look, see, come what we're doing and join with us, and bring that community feel, and you reap the rewards. And I'm a director for a multi-academy trust. That's what we're doing. My job is family support and well-being, and that's where bringing in those key messages to kind of share that. The other thing I just want to reiterate is the importance then of teaching. So we're looking at the court side of things, what we catch in the community, but the taught side of it is really important. So teaching the self-regulation and self-soothing skills to our students is crucial. And I have led just recently programs with our students and seen the benefit of pre and post data around well-being, when we've taught them, how does your brain work when you're overwhelmed? How can you regulate yourself? What works for you when you need to calm down away from the screen? And it's very powerful.
Thank you so much for sharing, Anna. Hayley, we're bang on 11 now.
No, it's fine. Sorry.
Oh no, I really feel like this is such a rich and fruitful conversation, and so it's really hard to kind of cut us off. We will be able to move into our breakout rooms and kind of share a little bit more. And we did have a question also where we're going to ask Shana about kind of addressing parental support, which I think is a really important question. And so I was wondering if everyone is happy to just run over by just 3 minutes. We could just very quickly hear from Sian, and then we will jump into our breakout rooms, because I just think it's such an important question for us to go through. So, Sian, how important is parental support in addressing students' digital well-being, and what strategies can schools use to engage parents effectively?
I think we're all hearing and we all know it's absolutely essential. I think a lot of it, has been covered in some ways with Hayley and Anna, and I think it's around that communication, and it's around the facts, because I work with a lot of families, and I work with a lot of families, supporting the schools because there's been a big safeguarding issue. I tend to be called in because, the higher level issues are going on, which the run through a number of students, a number of students can be involved. It's really worrying. There might be authorities they're talking about involving. So people are really nervous. And what tends to happen is you tend to get two different sides. One side of parents will be super defensive. My child would never have done that. It wasn't their fault, that kind of thing. And the other side will be, oh my God, what do I do? And I think what we really need to do is bring that, that support where somebody can. Defensive is that automatic feeling, I think, my child, and I'm scared, I'm scared now, what's going to happen? And I think if we can be working with families early on around the fact that, there's information about this, not a blame game, social media, being able to manage social media and phones. And so that defensiveness is quite easy to come on. But I think if we can be having the communication with parents, if we can, you know, think carefully about when you invite parents in, how they can access stuff. You know, everybody's busy, so are you bringing people in when you're doing parent-teacher workshops, you know, or parent-teacher meetings, and then can you run workshops around that because parents are coming in anyway? And then can you video some of the information and send it out to parents so they can access it when they need to? You know, can you send them PDFs that are really quick, a bit like the Wednesday ones that Jamie was talking about? You know, can you be sending people information that they can access, because it is worrying, you know, for parents. So I think when we bring parents in closer, then actually we start to build that relationship where it isn't us against them, you know, because I think a lot of the times parents feel like they're being criticized, as opposed to we're all in this together and we need to figure this out together. So I think it's really that message, without going on too much, but I hope that's helpful with what everybody else is saying as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Shan. Thank you to all of our panelists and to the National College for sponsoring this event today. And we will have links to everybody who's participated today, so you can look them up and kind of make contact with people as well. And we will share the reports and everything that we've been mentioned in here. So there's a couple of articles as well that we'd like to kind of share these resources with you. I've dropped in our link then to our breakout session. As soon as I end this session, that link will disappear and we will all be out of the room. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to copy and paste that and jump into that session before I join, and then start putting people into those breakout rooms. We've got a couple of questions we would like everybody to focus on. So maybe some key takeaways from today, but also what are you doing in your schools and how can we work kind of to support each other? It's a great opportunity to connect with other like-minded individuals and work at what is working in your school and what can I do if I've got a particular issue. Okay, so I'll just leave that there. Thank you everybody for joining us today. It's been a wonderful session.